Hey guys, welcome to the 69th C programming tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to continue looking at reading from files. And we're actually going to be reading from this file right here in this tutorial. So in this file, the first integer is just telling us how many entries there actually are in the file. So 4 right here just means that there are 4 score entries in the file. And at the beginning of each entry we just have a number. And this number tells us how long each person's name is. So 4 right here just means that there are 4 characters in Adam. 4 here means that there are 4 characters in Mary, and so on. So the first thing that we need to do when reading from this file is we're just going to go ahead and create a struct to store each score entry. So we want to have a character pointer for their name and an integer just for their score. So we're going to go up here and say type define a struct, and we'll just go ahead and put a character pointer for their name and an integer for their score. And we'll just go ahead and call this struct entry. So now that we already have this code written for us, what we need to do is just read the number of entries in the file, and that's just at the top right here. And in order to read this number from the file, we're going to be using a function called fscanf. And the fscanf function is pretty much the exact same thing as the scanf function, but the only difference is the fscanf function obviously allows you to read from a file. So we're going to say fscanf, and the first parameter for the fscanf function is just the file that you want to read from. So we're just going to put file right there. And then the second parameter is just the format of what you want to read. Pretty much the exact same thing as what you need to provide for scanf. So we just want to read a single integer, this integer right here. So we're going to say modulus I, and then we just need to go ahead and create a variable to store this number in. So we're going to say int entry count, and then we'll just go ahead and read that number at the beginning of the file into this entry count variable right here. So the address of entry count. So now that we know how many entries there are in the file, we're going to go ahead and create an array of entries that has entry count elements. So in order to do that, we're going to be using the malloc function to allocate the memory for it. So we're going to say entry pointer entries, and then we'll just go ahead and allocate the appropriate amount of memory. So size of entry times entry count. Alright, so in our file right here, there are 4 entries. So what it's going to do right here when it hits this line is it's going to allocate enough memory for 4 entry structs. Alright, so just inside of this array there will be 4 entry structs. And anytime that we call the malloc function, we're going to want to free it whenever we're done with it. So in the cleanup portion of our program right here, we're just going to go ahead and call free on that memory. So we're just going to go ahead and free entries. So now that we have this memory allocated, we can begin actually reading through all these entries. So we're going to say for int I equals 0 while I is less than entry count, and then we'll just increment I. Alright, so this right here will just simply loop through all the entries inside of the file. So at the beginning of each entry, we just have the number of characters inside of the person's name, and that's the first thing that we need to read. So we're going to go right here and just create a variable to store the name length. So we'll just call it name len, and then we'll just go ahead and use the fscanf function to go ahead and read that number. So fscanf, and then we just need to provide the file first actually, so file, and then the format, and we're reading an integer, so just modulus I, and then we just want to read it into name length, so name length. So after it hits this line right here, it's just going to simply read this number at the beginning of the entry into the name length variable. So now that we know how long the person's name is, we can allocate the appropriate amount of memory to store their name. So we're going to say entries at the index of I dot name equals, and then we just need to allocate the appropriate amount of memory to store their name in. So we're going to say malloc, and then the size of a character times name length plus 1. And we need to do plus 1 for the nil terminating character. So yes, Adam is 4 characters long, but we need 1 more for the null terminating character. And then after we've allocated the appropriate amount of memory for the person's name, we can go ahead and read the person's name and their score. So what we're going to do is just call fscanf again to read both their name and their score. So we're going to say fscanf, we want to read from that file, and the format is going to be modulus s for string space modulus I. So in our file right here, we just have the person's name and then a space, and then we just have their score. So string and then a space and then an integer. And then we want to read the string into entries at the index of I dot name, or name, and then we want to read the score into entries at the index of I dot score, and we actually need to provide the address of that. So after it hits this line of code right here, it's going to read both the person's name and the score into the entry struct at this index. Alright? So after we've read all this information, we're just going to go ahead and print it out onto the screen so we make sure that it worked properly. So we're going to say printf, so this will actually print it out onto the console, modulus I, period, then a space, and this will just be right here to show us the ranking. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then after that, we're just going to have a string for their name, and then a dash, and then an integer for their score. And then for their ranking, we're just going to do I plus 1. So if I is 0, then it'll be like 1 dot. If I is 2, then it'll be 3 dot, and so on. Alright, and then for the string, we just want to print out their name onto the screen. So entries at the index of I dot name, and then this integer right here is just going to be their score. So their score. No sense in writing it again. So that's pretty much it. Right there, that will read everything from this file and then print it all out onto the screen. However, we're not done yet. We still need to deallocate all this memory that we allocated for the string. So in the cleanup right here, before we free all the entries, we actually need to iterate through them and free all the memory that we allocated for their names. So what we can do right here is we can just say for int I equals 0 while I is less than entry count. And then we just want to call free on the entries at the index of I dot name. Alright, so basically right here when we allocate the memory for their name, down here we're just going to go ahead and deallocate it. Now when we run this program, we should get out onto the screen 1 dot Adam and then my score. And then it'll do that for all the score entries. So let's just make sure this works. Oops, I actually forgot to put a /n right there. Alright, and yeah, it worked perfectly. So let's just compare this to the file to make sure it worked. And yeah, we just have in first place is me, in second place is Mary with that score, and so on. Alright, so let me just go ahead and run through this code one more time to make sure that you fully understand it. Alright, so the first thing that we do right here is we just go ahead and we read the entry count at the top of the file into this entry count variable. Then we come down here and allocate the appropriate amount of memory for all of the entry count structs. So there are 4 entries inside of this file. So we allocated enough memory for 4 entry structs. So right here we just have an array of 4 entry structs, and then we just iterate through them right here and store all the information inside of these entries inside of those 4 entries in the array. The first thing that we do right here is we just read the name length at the beginning of each entry. So at the first entry right here, we just read 4 since Adam is 4 characters long. So after it goes through this line of code right here the first time, name length is now 4. Then we come down here and allocate the appropriate amount of memory for the person's name. So my name is just 4 characters long, so it does the size of a character times 4 plus 1. So Adam is 4 characters long, and then we just need to add 1 to it for the null terminating character. So it allocates 5 characters in memory, and then it just sets entries at the index of I.name equal to that address. So it allocates 5 characters of memory and then gives us back the address of that memory that it allocated and stores it inside of entries at the index of I.name. And then what we do right here is we go ahead and we read into that struct the person's name and then the score. So right here we're just going to go ahead and read the string into that memory that we allocated. So we allocated that memory here, and we're just going to go ahead and read the person's name into that memory with an fscanf function. And then we're going to go ahead and read the person's score, and we're going to go ahead and read the person's score into the actual struct. Okay? After we read all this information, we're just going to go ahead and print it out onto the screen so that we can actually see it. And then down here is just a cleanup, so we're closing the file, deallocating all the memory that we allocated for the person's name, and then we're just going to go ahead and free the entries altogether. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial, so see you guys.